Welcome back, fellow dreamers. Hey, I'm Echo, and I have really vivid dreams. Like, vivid, and maybe a little too much time to overthink them. Welcome to Echoes of Becoming, part dream journal, part existential support group, part gentle rebellion against the soul-crushing grind of late-stage capitalism. This isn't a guru podcast. I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm just trying to make sense of mine. Through dreams, through symbols, through weird metaphors that somehow make more sense than reality to me. And today's dream? Yeah, it hit deep. Today, I want to share a dream that reached way down into my subconscious. Like one of those dreams that kind of sticks on your brain when you wake up. The ones that linger on your mind. The kind that just kind of leave you in this weird mood after. Yeah, this was one of those. Firstly, it brought me back to old memories, one I honestly hadn't thought about in years. But I think dreams are like that. They hold on to moments we didn't know how to process at the time. They're like little portals to the past, inviting us to step back into those moments on an emotional level, to feel, to understand, and I think maybe even to heal. Because most of the time, these kinds of dreams stick with me because they make me reflect on my past. But in the moment after waking, I mostly just feel their weight. But if I write them down and reflect on them as the day goes on, they start to make sense. Like the pieces slowly come together and the understanding of the dream along with them. It's kind of cool. But yeah, that can feel super healing. So I want to share it with you. Not just the dream, but the feelings it tugged on. The echoes of old moments I didn't even realize were still tangled up inside me. Maybe you'll recognize parts of your own childhood emotions in it. This sense of not being in control, of sometimes feeling punished unfairly, of not being able to speak your mind because you weren't the one in charge. Maybe it'll help you tug on a thread your subconscious has been quietly holding, just waiting for the right moment to show you something. In the last episode, I mentioned how it can be really tough to take off your mask or masks and just be yourself. Because at least in my experience, we become so caught up in the mask that we don't even really know who the person underneath it is, the real us. So yeah, the dreams, the memories, even the scars, they're like gold. They're little bits of ourselves we can learn to reconnect to, process, and accept. They can tell us about our patterns, like why we always seem to pick crappy jobs, or why as soon as we encounter resistance or feel dismissed, we give up. Because I think that's how you can actually change. So let's begin and dive into this strange and symbolically layered dream. It started with my sister. She needed to get to work or school or something. Dreams tend not to be super clear about those kinds of things. They're more like, yeah, she had to go wherever people need to go in that other world you insist on calling reality. Anyway, she and I were both our adult selves, but we were living with my mom, which didn't make a whole lot of sense because that hasn't been true in years. But in dreams, time seems to thread itself together, past and present, smushed into a single moment. And yeah, for some reason, my mom had decided she was driving us that morning. It was actually my car, like my real life car, but I didn't argue. I felt smaller somehow, younger, more uncertain. And I just kind of let her take over. We got in the car, my sister in the back seat, me in the passenger seat, and my mom at the wheel. She drove the way she often did when I was a kid. Angry, sharp, like she had something to prove. She weaved through traffic, throwing insults at other drivers. And I just sat there, watching the city blur by. Not afraid exactly, but conditioned by experience to stay quiet. I knew how quickly speaking up could turn into a full-on confrontation. My sister and I both knew that if we did, if we pointed out how unsafe it felt, our mom would only drive worse. to make a point, to show us how good she was. Fear has a way of silencing you, doesn't it? Eventually, we pulled up to where we all needed to be. School, apparently. My mom worked there, and it seemed that me and my sister had classes to get to. One of the classes I'd signed up for was a singing class, but this particular class met at two different times. There was a morning class and an afternoon class, taught by two different instructors. But of course, this being a dream and all, I'd never attended the morning class. I had chosen to prioritize sleep instead. I remember feeling this heavy weight settle into my chest as I walked inside. My mom came with me, still caught up in her own energy, and started chatting with the professor, her colleague. This professor was imposing. She had this air of sharp intellect, the kind that makes you second guess every word before you even open your mouth to speak. I watched her watch me, her eyes narrow and unblinking as I found a seat. I felt guilty about not ever having attended her morning classes. I was always too drained from the chaos at home and would often need extra rest in the morning. But this professor, I could tell, was not someone whose class you simply skipped, and I could feel her judgment coil around me like a snake. The bell rang, my mom hurried out, and class began. And it was strange. The professor began by passing each student two raw chicken breasts and instructing them to eat them. I watched as everyone did it without question, like it was normal, like it was just part of their morning routine. But I hesitated, holding a cold, slippery raw chicken breast in each hand. It honestly felt super gross, and I stood there baffled that I was the only one resisting this bizarre request. But when I looked up, the professor was staring right at me. I could feel the weight of it, the expectation. I reasoned that there must be a very good explanation for this, since everyone had complied so easily. I'd obviously just missed the class where the professor had explained why this was beneficial for your voice or something. Some kind of well-kept secret amongst the pros. So I raised the raw chicken to my mouth and took a small bite. It was cold and sickening, but the professor smiled faintly and finally looked away, satisfied. The class then moved on to some kind of test. At the back of the classroom, a projector turned on, and a karaoke-style backtrack with lyrics began playing and appearing on the screen. The professor began calling on students one by one, handing them the mic, and challenging them to keep singing when the lyrics disappeared. Some stumbled, some shone, but each one got their chance. I sat there, waiting nervously, but it soon became clear that she wasn't going to call on me. I hadn't earned it in her eyes. I wasn't worthy of that spotlight, for a chance to shine in her classroom. I felt the heavy weight of shame and humiliation settle into my chest. Class finally ended, and I stood up, ready to leave. But the professor stopped me. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the murmurs of students shuffling out. "No, you stay," she said. I froze. She waited until the classroom was empty, and then stepped out into the hall, returning shortly with a random man she'd just grabbed who was passing by. The professor motioned for the stranger to follow her, moving closer to me, placing him between the two of us. She looked at me, then back at him, and said, "Repeat what I say, exactly as I say it." He moved in close, so close I could feel the breath against my ear. His voice was low, deliberate, repeating every word the professor spoke. Ironically, I don't remember most of her actual words, but I remember how they felt. Her words were sharp but steady, like they were slicing through something thick and heavy inside me. She knew my mother, since they were colleagues, and I think part of her understood the struggles I'd faced due to my upbringing. But she was stern in saying that I couldn't let that struggle make me give up. You can't let this steal your life, she said. You have to make the decision to show up for yourself, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because you are the only one who can. The tall man's voice echoed her word right into my ear, each one landing like a stone, and I began to cry. First, silently, then openly, right there in that empty classroom. This whole exchange felt like being seen, while also being gently reminded that I could be more than my past and my childhood programming. The professor's gaze softened, just a little, enough to let me know that she saw me, not just the student who missed class, but the girl who'd been living in the midst of chaos every single day, too tired to show up for her own life. And I woke up crying, that feeling of her words still lingering in my mind, paired with a strange sense of release. I don't often wake up crying, but this dream really touched something in me. It made me remember all the times I've held myself back, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't think I had the energy to show up. It felt like the dream held an explanation for that pattern, while also gently telling me, you can't let this defeat you. But before we dive into the reflection, I want to take a moment to look at this dream through a more symbolic lens. Because when we pull it apart just a little, the meaning becomes even clearer. Each part of this dream seems to speak in metaphor, like my subconscious was laying out a quiet map of where I've been and what still needs healing. The first major symbol for me was the car ride with my sister and my mom. This part felt deeply connected to my past lived experience. But it wasn't just transportation. It was a metaphor for powerlessness, for being steered by someone who maybe shouldn't have been in control of the car or my life, which is actually made even clearer by the fact that it was my car. It's the experience of being trapped by someone else's chaos and calling it normal because it's all you knew. I'm sure most of you can recall moments like that from your own childhood. Our parents were probably just trying their best to deal with their own problems, but we were right there next to them, witnessing and experiencing. The next major symbol would have to be the singing class. This is a space where voice and expression are supposed to live, but I was excluded from it, silenced with a quiet dismissal. That's often how it feels growing up in an environment where your presence isn't met with understanding. It's not always loud abuse like how it's often depicted in movies and TV shows. Sometimes it's the quiet ache of being overlooked. For me, it wasn't just my parents, it was adults in general. I was the quiet one, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who did well enough in school, for example, not to need extra attention. And so I learned to awkwardly figure out things for myself and earn the badge of being resourceful. Which, yeah, is amazing sometimes, but it also makes it really easy for me to dismiss ever needing help. And then we had the raw chicken breasts that the rest of the class happily consumed. This was such a strange detail, but maybe it's about the things we're asked to consume or accept without questioning. Things that feel wrong, unsafe, unnatural, or just simply not for us. And when you finally take a bite, it's not because you're okay with it, but because the silent pressure becomes too much. Or maybe you were the kid with sensitivity issues and just had trouble eating certain things or textures, but that wasn't acceptable because you had to eat whatever was on your plate. And I get it. Parenting is hard because you're also supposed to make sure your kids eat enough and get the right nutrition and all that. I get it. I do. I have a lot of empathy for parents, including my own, despite not being a parent myself. That experience and pressure as the provider for your kids is totally valid. But so was your experience as a kid. Whether it was one where meals were a constant battle, or you quietly forced yourself to eat to avoid conflict, or where you swallowed your own feelings and words instead. As you can probably tell from my dream, I am definitely the kind of person who prefers to avoid conflict. But I hope I would definitely draw the line at raw chicken. Again, it's not always about food. It's about everything we're told to swallow, even if it doesn't sit right in our gut. Then there was the karaoke sequence. Now, I should probably mention that I'm a singer, or at least I was at some point in my life, and now just mostly do it for fun. But yeah, I often dream about scenarios where I have to sing or perform, but I've come to realize these moments more as a metaphor for self expression. And in this particular dream, singing or self expression felt like a test. Can you still sing when the support disappears? When the lyrics vanish and it's just you? Sometimes real life feels like that too. We don't get the lyrics, the support disappears, and we're left to figure it all out on our own and do our best. I have so often ended up in situations like that. But I was never even given the mic. I wasn't given the chance to try. And sometimes we're actually the ones who denied ourselves that chance. Because shame convinces you that you didn't earn your chance, sometimes over things that were never in your control. Finally, there was the professor, who was, to me, the most interesting part of this dream. She was harsh, yes, but she also saw me in her own way. She spoke through someone else, because sometimes we can't hear the truth unless it comes from a safe distance, like a favorite author or a strange little podcaster. But yeah, this professor, she knew my story. Or she had at the very least guessed enough to tell me, you have to show up for your life. She didn't pity me. She challenged me. And in a strange way, that felt like love. This is probably what hit me hardest in the whole dream. Because frustrated parents, tests, swallowing things that weren't for me, those are things I've experienced more times than I can count. But someone coming up to me and saying, hey, don't give up before you've even begun. Yeah, that hasn't happened very often for me, if ever. Has it happened to you? We always hear stories of that one teacher or mentor saying exactly the right thing at the right moment that completely changes the trajectory of someone's life, don't we? And how many of us are just waiting for that moment? For someone to give us permission to no longer let our history and childhood programming dictate our lives. Well, you're here now, so let me tell you something. You deserve a chance to try out your life for yourself. You deserve to reinvent yourself as many times as you need to. You're allowed to stumble as you figure out who you really are. You deserve to know what it feels like to show up for yourself. Don't give up. You're not alone. Keep going. Anyway, I would say those are the major symbols I was able to pick up on. If you noticed something else in the dream that stood out to you, another symbol, another interpretation, I'd love to hear about it. Dreams speak in a language that's personal, and you might pick up on something I didn't. So, with that in mind, let's reflect on the dream. After waking up from this dream, I remember just lying there, tears silently falling, not quite sure what had cracked open in me, what had been healed, but knowing that something had. My dreams usually hit me emotionally first, and then the understanding comes along later. Now, with a little distance, I see the layers more clearly. That car ride sequence, that wasn't just a dream. It felt like a reflection of my childhood. The experience of being swept along in someone else's stress, frustration, and anxiety, feeling powerless to change anything, by someone who refused to slow down and ask what her inner chaos was doing to those around her. As the collateral damage, I learned how to go quiet, how to read the mood in a split second and adjust myself to it, because speaking up usually made things worse or harder. It's plain to see how much that still lives in me sometimes. the fear of speaking up, the silence that kept me safe. And this is actually part of why I started this podcast in the first place, to let myself be seen, not just the polished parts, but the tender, messy, unfiltered ones too. Again, I want to reiterate that I have deep empathy for parents all over the world. It's quite the challenge you've taken on, my friends. My love for my own mother is unconditional, despite the boundaries I've had to set in place as I've begun to grow more firmly into myself. But all the love and boundaries can't erase the scars that experience has left behind. I think many of us grow up believing we owe our parents unquestionable gratitude, loyalty, and respect, as though it's a debt we're born into, rather than something to be earned. But dreams don't tiptoe. They don't try to sugarcoat felt experience that deeply marked us. They don't wrap up those moments in pretty bows. They give it to us as raw as those chicken breasts. And the truth that this dream took me back to was a period in my childhood where my mom had to drive my 11-year-old self and my 8-year-old sister through an hour-long commute daily, one that was often extremely stressful due to the wild card that is traffic. Life can be stressful. We all know this. But I swear, it's like some people were programmed to thrive on it. Like, they will deliberately seek out situations that will take years off their life just to give their bodies whatever chemicals they've learned to crave. And after years of exposure to such a person, I was well on my way to becoming that way too. I had 4 part-time jobs while I was in university, plus a side hustle, plus like actual classes to attend and stuff. And I boasted about it, about how much I could juggle. Burnout? Never heard of her. It's no wonder I was drowning in panic attacks just a few years later. But that's a story for another time. The class, that was my voice. That deep longing I've always had to express something real. To sing, not only literally, but also symbolically. To be heard. And oh, how often I've disqualified myself before I even stepped forward. How many times have I said, I missed too many classes, or I'm too far behind to shine now? Even now that I've taken this leap and started this podcast, I feel like I constantly have to overcome the doubts inside me that are screaming, what are you doing? Are you crazy? This will never work. Nobody wants to hear about your weird dreams and not so special life. We all do this, right? Give up on dreams or gut feelings that are trying to lead us towards something that actually feels meaningful. We try to snuff out those so-called delusions and choose the well-worn path instead. The one with the steady job with growth opportunities. The one where we cling to people that seem to tolerate parts of us instead of looking for the ones that would allow us to be fully ourselves. The one where we force ourselves to eat fish once a week, despite it feeling like you're eating cardboard, because it's good for us. Because heaven only knows what horrible things could happen if we actually chose to live by our deep instincts, rather than the well-known path that seems to lead to a lot of depression and Friday nights where you're already thinking about Monday morning. That dream reminded me how easy it is to stay quiet, small, realistic, when you've been taught that visibility and shining too brightly is dangerous. But it also showed me that something in me is done being quiet. I know not everyone will resonate with what I have to share, but maybe some of you will. I mean, if you've gotten this far in, I have to assume you either liked something you heard or maybe even felt something. It is so good to have you here. Wave at me with a like or a comment or let me know you're out there, that I'm not alone anymore. The professor's message, stern and compassionate all at once, felt like a voice from within me, a part of me that's ready to show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. To be honest, I'm not quite sure when it stops being hard. Maybe never, or maybe it just gets a little easier over time. But it's also honestly pretty exciting. I'm sending out my signal and seeing if I hear anything back. And I know, after 6 months of unemployment, this is probably not where I should be directing my efforts. I should probably definitely affirmatively be looking for a job. But it's also the first time in years I've had enough time to recover from the burnout of squeezing myself into boxes to conform. This is the absolute best time for me to do this. But it's scary. Yeah, boys, it's scary. But that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm making these podcast episodes. Not because I have everything figured out, not because I've healed, but because I'm choosing to show up anyway. To be honest about the process of becoming who you are, and how it's not something you can learn in a $5,000 2-day workshop in Costa Rica led by some apparently enlightened middle-aged white dude. We want the quick fix because it's scary to decide to finally face your dark side, your shadow, your ugly truths, and deep, deep wounded feelings. We want someone to just give us a roadmap we can follow, with organic snacks along the way, and a graduation at the end. Congrats, you're healed or saved or awakened. I'm sorry to have to be the one to tell you this, but that won't work. You've got to do the real scary work. They say, if you're scared, do it scared. So here I am. What are you scared of, dear dreamer? What is holding you back? What file cabinets in your subconscious do you refuse to open or even look at? Have you ever wondered how much of your silence was survival? What parts of yourself you kept quiet to stay safe? How many moments you've swallowed instead of spoken up, just to keep the peace, not to rock the boat? So you don't risk the small, comfortable amount of safety you've managed to accumulate by playing it safe. And I'm not judging, by the way. I'm basically describing myself. I get it. I'm right there with you, curled up on my little cloud of contentment. What are the memories and messages that got imprinted in your subconscious mind early on? What experiences have you neglected to think about? Maybe it wasn't chaotic car rides for you. Maybe it was the sound of footsteps in the hall, the tightening in your chest at the dinner table when a few words made the energy shift, that sinking feeling of receiving a bad grade on your report card, knowing the looks of disappointment that awaited you at home. What would it mean to reclaim those moments now? To sing in whatever way you sing, even if you missed a few classes. There are so many things that want to keep us small in this world. Can we find a way to start creating places where we can grow? And maybe you don't feel quite ready yet. I've been waiting nearly a decade to take this small and tentative step into the world via this podcast. I wanted to start earlier, but I never felt quite ready. Like whatever I shared wouldn't really feel like me. And I didn't want to just create meaningless content. I've mentioned this before, but I'm still in the process of becoming or remembering who I really am. And no doubt you are too. I honestly don't think we ever stop becoming. It's definitely one of those the journey, not the destination sort of undertaking. So if you don't feel ready for whatever thing part of you aches for, there's no shame in that. There's no need to rush it. It'll still be there when you're ready, even if it's not exactly what you thought it would be. If that dream had continued, I doubt I would have become the student who started showing up to every morning class, especially if I had to eat raw chicken breast at the start of each lesson. No, chances are I'd have shown up to some and kept sleeping in the rest of the time. Or maybe my anxiety about the teacher would have meant I dropped the class entirely. If you need more time, more sleep, if you're a parent struggling to juggle all the expectations that implies, if you're caught up in one responsibility or another, or if you're simply just not quite ready yet, I think it's all valid, and that it's not something you should or can rush. But keep it always close to your heart, even when it aches. Don't let yourself forget it, and inch towards it on the good days. Don't let whatever's holding you back steal your whole life. Don't let it convince you to give up before you've even begun. I'm going to keep dreaming, and I hope you will too. Again, if this resonated with you, I'm really glad you're here. These dreams I wander through most nights, they're not just mine. They're fragments of something we all carry, things worth exploring. So if you'd like to keep journeying with me through dreams, through meaning, through becoming, consider subscribing or just stick around. I haven't quite figured out what kind of presence I want to have on social media yet, but I'll leave the links in the description in case you want to follow along and see what sort of strange and lovely things I'll start posting. And if you'd like to support the continuation of this project, I'll be setting up a Ko-Fi page or Ko-fi. Think of it like dropping a tip into my dream jar. No pressure, just a gesture if you feel called. The link will eventually be put in the description. But if not, that's okay too. Just be here, listening, feeling something alongside me. That's already a gift. If you ever want to share your own stories or reflections, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment or reach out to me anytime. Until next time, keep dreaming, dreamer.